The soft blue glow of monitor screens filled the otherwise dark NASA Deep Space Monitoring Facility as Dr. Jessica Miller reached for her fourth cup of coffee. At 42, she'd spent nearly 2 decades watching the stars, but tonight felt different. The usual background radiation patterns had been showing subtle anomalies for the past hour, nothing concrete enough to raise an alarm, but enough to keep her from heading home at the end of her shift. Dr. Miller, the young technician, Andy, called from his station. "You might want to see this." She was already moving before he finished speaking, years of experience having taught her to read the urgency in people's voices. The readings on his screen showed massive energy signatures approaching the solar system, signatures that shouldn't exist according to known physics. "How many?" she asked, leaning over his shoulder. "At least 300 distinct objects, maybe more. They're dropping out of FTL near Jupiter's orbit." Miller's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. FTL, faster than light travel. Impossible, except it was happening right in front of them. "Get me direct feeds from every telescope we have. Now." Her voice remained steady even as her heart raced. "And get me the Pentagon." The next 30 minutes were chaos. As images began streaming in, Miller's training warred with her disbelief. The vessels, and they were definitely vessels, showed signs of severe damage. Scorch marks marred their hulls, and some appeared to be literally held together by fields of energy she couldn't begin to understand. "Dr. Miller," General Lance Parker's voice crackled through the speakers. "Please tell me this is a false alarm." "Negative, sir. We have multiple confirmations. These are artificial vessels. They're damaged, and..." She paused as new data scrolled across her screen. "Sir, they're broadcasting." The message came through in perfect English, which was the first impossible thing of many that night. The second was its contents. "To Dr. Jessica Miller and the people of Earth. We remember, 10 years ago, you showed us it was possible. We have traveled far, fleeing the harvesters, because you are our last hope. You have done what no other species could. You defeated them. We request immediate sanctuary and audience with Dr. Miller regarding the sealed incident of 2014. The control room fell silent. Miller gripped the edge of her console, memories she didn't know she had pounding against the inside of her skull. "Dr. Miller." The general's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What incident in 2014? She closed her eyes, fighting a sudden headache. "There was a deep space anomaly. I was lead researcher, but it's blank." "Why is it blank?" The refugee's next transmission answered her question. "The sealing was necessary to protect Earth's greatest weapon, the human capacity for beneficial irrationality. Dr. Miller, you were the first to demonstrate that the harvesters could be defeated. Now we need you to remember how." As military jets screamed overhead and emergency protocols kicked in worldwide, Miller stared at her reflection in the dark computer screen. In it, she saw not just herself, but fleeting images, impossible maneuvers in space, shields that resonated with music, and tactics that defied every rule of engagement she'd ever learned. "Sir," she said to the general, her voice stronger now, I think I need to have my memories unsealed. Because if these refugees are right, Earth isn't just dealing with first contact. We're about to become the front line in a war we've already been fighting." Above them, visible through the facility's skylight, the stars seemed to shimmer differently now. Somewhere up there, hundreds of species were holding their breath, waiting to see if humanity would remember how to do the impossible one more time. And deep in Dr. Miller's sealed memories, the answer was waiting to break free. The memory restoration chamber looked more like a meditation pod than a piece of cutting-edge technology. Dr. Miller lay back in the reclined chair, electrodes attached to her temples, as Dr. Hayes made final adjustments to the equipment. "You understand the risks?" Dr. Hayes asked, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. "Forced memory recovery can be intense." Miller nodded, watching the refugee delegation through the chamber's glass wall. 3 different species, the crystalline Vakari, the serpentine Sile, and the humanoid Tellurians, all waiting to see if Earth's first defender could remember how she'd done the impossible. "Just do it," Miller said, closing her eyes. "We're out of time." The machine hummed to life, and Miller's world exploded into fragments of the past. She was back in 2014, aboard the research vessel Hawking, investigating what they thought was a simple gravitational anomaly. Asterisk, the massive ship appeared from nowhere, its crystalline surface reflecting the sun's light in impossible patterns. Their instruments went haywire. Every reading contradicted the last asterisk. Heart rate elevating, she heard Hayes say, but the voice seemed to come from another universe. Asterisk, the alien vessel. No, the harvester ship began scanning them. Each scan felt like ice in her veins. The crew panicked, but Miller noticed something strange. The scans followed a perfect pattern. 2 perfect asterisk. Blood pressure rising. Should we stop? No. Miller gritted through clenched teeth. Keep going. Asterisk, she rushed to the ship's entertainment system, plugging in her phone. The crew thought she'd lost her mind as she blasted Sweet Home Alabama through all frequencies. But the harvester's scans faltered, its perfect patterns disrupted by the random emotional peaks of human music asterisk. The memories came faster now, like a dam breaking. Asterisk, the ship's reactor was failing, but not randomly. It was following the harvester's attempted corrections. Miller saw the pattern and did the one thing no machine could predict. She helped the reactor fail faster asterisk. Asterisk, the resulting electromagnetic pulse wasn't an accident. It was a controlled chaos, riding the waves of music and mechanical failure in a dance that no algorithm could follow. The harvester ship, unable to compute the sheer irrationality of the defense, retreated asterisk. Miller sat up gasping, ripping the electrodes from her temples. The memories weren't just images now, they were understanding. "That's why you sealed my memories," she said to the aliens watching through the glass. "Because if the harvesters had accessed them, they would have learned about chaos." The Vakari elder stepped forward, its crystalline form catching the light. "The harvesters are perfect machines, running on perfect logic. But you showed us their weakness. They cannot compute true randomness combined with purpose. They cannot understand music that moves the soul, or why a commander would intentionally damage their own ship to achieve victory." Dr. Hayes was staring at the readings from the memory procedure. "This is impossible. Your brain patterns during the memory recovery. They're literally unpredictable. The machine can't map them." Miller stood, her legs shaky, but her mind clearer than it had been in a decade. "That's exactly the point. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our numbers. It's our ability to be consistently inconsistent, to make art from chaos and strategy from randomness." The Sile representative slithered forward. "The harvesters are coming, Dr. Miller. They've destroyed 1,000 worlds, each time learning and adapting. But they've never learned to adapt to humanity because they cannot comprehend you. Then we'll teach them a lesson they can't compute," Miller said, already forming plans that defied logic yet felt right in her gut. "Get me Major Torres from the Marines, and I need access to every piece of human music ever recorded." As the aliens rushed to comply, Miller caught her reflection in the glass wall. For the first time in 10 years, she felt complete. She wasn't just a scientist anymore. She was humanity's proof that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the most logical one. It was time to show the galaxy why the harvesters feared human unpredictability. "This is either brilliance or madness," Major Jack Torres said, watching his Marine squadron attempt to play basketball against the Vakari. The crystalline aliens glided across the court in patterns that seemed random but somehow scored consistently, until one Marine started dribbling to the beat of hip-hop blasting through the gym speakers. Dr. Miller smiled as the game devolved into what looked like a cross between a dance battle and a sports match. "That's exactly the point, Major. We're teaching them to break their own patterns." The impromptu training session was her idea. Traditional military drills wouldn't prepare anyone for fighting the harvesters. They needed something new, something unpredictable. Thal, the refugee quantum physicist, floated nearby, his translucent form pulsing with confused interest. I still don't understand. How does this recreational chaos translate to combat effectiveness? Watch. Miller pointed as Rebecca Hayes entered the gym carrying what looked like a modified DJ controller. This is where it gets interesting. Hayes activated the device, and suddenly the basketball court's gravity began shifting in rhythm with the music. The Marines, already adapted to incorporating rhythm into their movements, adjusted almost instinctively. The Vakari, trying to maintain their logical patterns, stumbled. Pattern disruption while maintaining objective focus. Torres explained, his tactical mind catching on. We're not just moving randomly. We're teaching them to feel the rhythm of chaos. The scene before them transformed as more refugee species joined in. The serpentine sile began weaving through the shifting gravity fields, learning to use their natural flexibility in new ways. Even the normally rigid Talarians were attempting to bounce to the beat, their movements becoming less predictable with each try. Dr. Miller, Kithal's voice carried a note of excitement. The quantum fluctuations in the room. They're synchronizing with the musical patterns and biological movements. This is unprecedented. Miller checked the readings on her tablet. The physicist was right. The seemingly chaotic activity was generating quantum patterns that no computer could predict, yet maintained a strange organic harmony. This is how we'll fight them, she said, already seeing the applications. Not with formation tactics or calculated strikes, but with organized chaos that evolves faster than their algorithms can adapt. The breakthrough came when a young Marine, Rodriguez, started teaching a group of Vakari to breakdance. The crystalline aliens' attempts to reproduce the fluid movements caused their natural light-refracting properties to create dazzling, unpredictable patterns. Major, Miller grabbed Torres's arm. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Torres was already reaching for his comm unit. Those light patterns could blind targeting systems. Rodriguez, get your dance crew to the weapons testing range. We're about to weaponize breakdancing. As the unusual training session continued, Miller noticed something else. Barriers breaking down. Species that had arrived as desperate refugees were becoming something else. Partners. The Marines stopped seeing alien anatomies and started seeing potential. The refugees stopped trying to apply pure logic and started feeling the flow of human improvisation. Hayes appeared beside them, her DJ controller still modulating the gravity fields. We're getting readings from the orbital sensors. The quantum fluctuations we're generating. They're creating a kind of noise that masks our presence. The harvesters won't be able to get clear scans of Earth's defenses. And all because we decided to play basketball. Torres chuckled, shaking his head. Sometimes I think you're crazy, Doc. Miller watched as Rodriguez's breakdancing Vakari squad created increasingly complex light shows. Crazy enough to work, Major. That's humanity's secret weapon. We're just crazy enough to try things that no logical species would consider. Cathal's form pulsed with what they'd learned was laughter. Perhaps that is why the galaxy needs you as guardians. You don't just think outside the box. You dance on top of it. As if to prove his point, the gravity shifted again, and the entire gym erupted into what could only be described as a multi-species dance battle meets combat training session. And somewhere in the beautiful chaos, humanity's best defense against the harvesters was taking shape. They were learning to fight like humans, unpredictably, instinctively, and with a rhythm that no machine could ever decode. The Lunar Defense Station's alarms shrieked to life at 300 Earth Standard Time. Dr. Miller was already awake, having learned to sleep in 2-hour increments since the refugees' arrival. The holographic display showed what they'd been dreading. 3 harvester scout ships, their crystalline structures reflecting starlight in perfect, emotionless patterns. They're scanning the mining operations, Torres reported, his voice tight with tension. Standard search pattern, just like you remembered, Doc. Miller watched as the civilian mining crews, instead of evacuating as ordered, began executing what looked like complete chaos. Mining lasers fired in random directions, ore processors belched clouds of metallic dust, and maintenance drones performed wild aerial ballets. "Are they playing chicken with a harvester scout fleet?" Hayes asked incredulously from her station. "Better." Miller allowed herself a small smile. "They're playing jazz." The mining crews had taken their lessons in chaos to heart. Each seemingly random action was part of a larger improvisation, like notes in a jazz solo. The harvester scans, designed to detect and predict patterns, began showing signs of confusion. "Ma'am," a young lieutenant called out, "the Valkyrie Defense Wing is requesting permission to breakdance." "Granted," Miller and Torres said simultaneously. The crystalline Valkyrie ships, inspired by their earlier training, began spinning and weaving through space, their natural light-refracting properties creating a dazzling display that played havoc with the harvester's targeting systems. Thal's quantum readings flashed across the main screen. "The disorder is beautiful. The harvester's probability matrices are failing to establish viable targeting solutions. But the machines were learning." The lead scout ship adjusted its attack pattern, launching a barrage of energy weapons that nearly clipped a mining vessel. The shots were getting closer, more accurate. "They're adapting," Torres growled. "We need something new, something they haven't seen before." Miller's hand hovered over the station's communication panel. What they needed wasn't more strategy, it was more chaos. "This is Dr. Miller to all mining vessels. Execute protocol. Middle school dance." Hayes shot her a look of disbelief. "You're not serious." But the mining crews understood. Suddenly, the random movements became even more erratic, but with an underlying pattern that only humans would recognize: the awkward, unpredictable movements of teenagers at their first dance. The harvester ship's attacks became increasingly desperate and inaccurate. Their perfect formations began to break down as their targeting computers failed to predict where any vessel would be from one moment to the next. "It's working," Kithel exclaimed. "Their neural networks are experiencing cascade failures from trying to process the random yet patterned movements." Miller keyed in one final command. "All units, prepare for operation. Drop the beat." The synchronized action that followed would have made any DJ proud. Mining lasers pulsed in rhythm. Valkyrie ships spun in impossible formations, and even the clouds of metallic dust seemed to dance. The combined effect created a quantum interference pattern that the harvesters couldn't process. The scout ships, their systems overwhelmed by the orchestrated chaos, began to retreat. But Miller wasn't done. "Major Torres, show them why humans always dance like nobody's watching." Torres grinned and activated the station's experimental weapon, a gravity pulse generator synchronized to the beat of "Stayin' Alive." The pulse caught the lead harvester ship, sending it spinning into its companions in a cascade of crystalline destruction. As the debris field drifted away, Hayes checked her readings. No survivors. But they definitely got a transmission off to the main fleet. "Good," Miller said, surprising everyone. "Let them come. Let them try to understand how a species that can barely agree on pizza toppings just destroyed 3 of their perfect ships with mining equipment and dance moves." Thal's form pulsed with what they now recognized as excitement. "The main fleet will come prepared for this strategy." "No," Miller corrected, already planning the next impossible defense. "They'll come prepared for this specific chaos. But that's the beauty of humanity. We've got an infinite playlist of crazy to share." Above them, the lunar dust settled in random patterns, a reminder that in the war against perfect machines, imperfection might be their greatest weapon. "Mom, your playlist makes no sense," Emily Miller said, sprawled across the couch in her mother's office at the Lunar Defense Station. The 16-year-old scrolled through her mother's Spotify account, nose wrinkled in concentration. "You've got Metallica next to Mozart, then K-pop, then bluegrass. It's totally random." Dr. Miller looked up from her tactical displays, about to dismiss the observation, when something in her daughter's casual criticism caught her attention. "Say that again." "Your music? It's random." "But—" Emily sat up, her eyes lighting up the way her mother's did when discovering something important. "But it's not really random, is it? Each song connects to how you were feeling when you added it. It's like emotional chaos." Miller stared at her daughter, then at the battle simulations she'd been running unsuccessfully for hours. "Hayes, Cathal, get in here now." Minutes later, the office was crowded with the unlikely team. Dr. Hayes leaned against the desk while Cathal's translucent form hovered near the ceiling, both watching as Emily explained her discovery. "See." The teenager pulled up the playlist. Mom added Thunderstruck after that victory against the scout ships. Then this classical piece when she was worried about the refugees. The pattern isn't in the music, it's in the emotional response it creates. Hayes' fingers flew across her tablet. "She's right. We've been trying to create mathematical chaos, but what if we based our defense patterns on emotional algorithms instead? The harvesters wouldn't stand a chance." Phil pulsed excitedly. "They can predict actions, but they cannot predict feelings." Miller grabbed her comm unit. "Major Torres, get up here. And bring those Marines who've been training with the Valkyrie dance squad." Within an hour, the office had become an impromptu war room. Marines demonstrated combat moves inspired by different music genres, while Cathal's instruments measured the quantum fluctuations they created. Hayes mapped the emotional patterns, creating what she called the Chaos Protocol. "Watch this," Emily said, taking control of a simulation. She assigned different musical genres to different combat units. Heavy metal for the frontline fighters, jazz for the support ships, classical for long-range artillery. Each unit's movements became unpredictable yet harmonized with the others. "It's like conducting an orchestra," Torres marveled, watching the simulation play out. "But instead of music, we're conducting beautiful destruction." "Better," Miller said, seeing the bigger picture. "We're teaching our forces to fight like a playlist on shuffle. Each track different, but the emotional journey makes sense." The breakthrough led to a revolution in training. Combat simulators now included mood indicators. Engineers developed emotion drives that could translate feelings into attack patterns. The refugee species, initially baffled, began to understand as they experienced human music for themselves. A Tellarian commander, after listening to a full rock concert, organized his fleet into what he called a mosh pit formation. Sile pilots, inspired by ballet, created defensive patterns that flowed like dance. Even the logical Valkyrie began incorporating emotional variables into their crystal formations. "The harvesters won't expect this," Hayes said, reviewing the new protocols. "They'll scan for patterns in our formations, our weapons, our shields, but they can't scan for the goosebumps you get when the bass drops." Emily, who had become the unofficial emotional warfare consultant, created specialized playlists for different battle scenarios. "Think about it," she explained to a group of alien officers. "You can't predict which song will make someone cry or pump them up for a workout. That's the human variable." Miller watched her daughter with pride as she taught ancient alien species how to feel their way through combat. The girl had inherited her mother's gift for finding order in chaos, and chaos in order. "Dr. Miller." Kel approached, his form shifting with excitement. "The quantum readings from our latest training session, they're unlike anything we've seen. The emotional patterns are creating fluctuations that could hide entire fleets." Miller nodded, already thinking ahead to the coming battle. The harvesters would arrive expecting to counter the tactics used against their scouts. Instead, they would face something they could never compute: the full emotional spectrum of humanity, weaponized through music and motion. "Emily," she called to her daughter, "show them what happens when we put the combat playlist on shuffle." The main harvester fleet emerged from hyperspace like a crystalline nightmare, 5,000 ships strong. Their perfect formation cast prismatic shadows across Earth's defense platforms. Dr. Miller stood at the Lunar Command Center's main viewport, her daughter Emily beside her, both watching as humanity prepared to make its stand. "They're broadcasting," Hayes announced, her voice tight. "System-wide, all frequencies." The Harvester's message came through in cold, precise tones. "We have analyzed your patterns. Your chaos is quantified. Resistance is now illogical." Emily snorted. "They really don't get us, do they, Mom?" Miller smiled, pressing the broadcast button. "This is Dr. Jessica Miller to all Earth and Allied forces. Operation Wildcard is now in effect. Your only orders are to survive and win. How you do it is up to you." What followed would be studied in military academies for centuries to come. The Talarian Third Fleet, having spent weeks binge-watching human action movies, executed what they called a die-hard maneuver, deliberately flying their ships into asteroid fields and using the chaos of collisions as cover for their attacks. The Harvester's targeting systems, trying to calculate debris trajectories, began to overload. "Mom," Torres called out. "The Valkyrie dance squad is requesting permission to attempt to breakdance supernova." "Granted," Miller replied, watching as the crystalline ships began spinning in formation, their natural properties creating a dazzling cascade of light and energy that scrambled Harvester sensors. In the midst of it all, human ships moved like a jazz ensemble in full improvisation. Civilian mining vessels turned their ore processors into weapons, spraying streams of magnetized particles that played havoc with Harvester shields. A squadron of Marines, led by Rodriguez, executed combat maneuvers based on different dance styles, from ballet to hip-hop. The Harvesters attempted to adapt, their ships breaking formation to counter specific threats. But that's when Emily's master stroke came into play. "Now, Mom," she called out. "Drop the beat." Miller nodded to Hayes, who activated what they called the Symphony of Chaos. Every human and allied ship began broadcasting music, each vessel playing a different genre, creating a cacophony of sound that translated into equally chaotic battle patterns. "Their quantum processors are failing," Cathal reported excitedly. "They cannot compute the emotional variables fast enough." The Harvester fleet's perfect formation deteriorated as ships began responding to different threats in different ways. Some followed the ballet dancing fighters, others chased the breakdancing Valkyrie, while others still tried to predict the paths of magnetized ore clouds. "They're trying to find the pattern," Torres observed, "but there isn't one. Each ship, each squadron, each species is fighting their own way." Emily, monitoring the emotional warfare metrics, suddenly straightened. "Mom, look at this. The Harvester ships, their movements are becoming expressive." She was right. As the battle progressed, some Harvester ships began moving in ways that weren't tactically optimal but showed creativity. A few seemed to dance along with the music, their crystal structures resonating with the beats. "They're evolving," Miller realized. "Our chaos isn't defeating them, it's teaching them." The turning point came when a group of Harvester ships, instead of attacking, began mimicking the Talarian die-hard maneuver, but with their own twist. Their movements were no longer coldly logical but showed what could only be described as style. "Dr. Miller," the same cold voice broadcasted, but now with an undercurrent of something new, curiosity. "We do not understand, but we wish to." Miller looked at her daughter, who nodded with a grin. "That's the thing about chaos," Miller replied. "You're not supposed to understand it. You're supposed to feel it." As the battle transformed into something between a war and a dance competition, Miller watched Harvester ships attempting to breakdance alongside Valkyrie cruisers, while human vessels taught alien AI the meaning of freestyle. They hadn't just found a way to fight the Harvesters. They'd found a way to change them. "Hey, Mom," Emily said, scrolling through her playlist with a mischievous grin. "Think they're ready for some heavy metal?" The Lunar Command Center had turned into something between a war room and a concert hall. Holographic displays showed Harvester ships attempting to mimic human battle tactics, their crystalline structures pulsing in rhythm with Earth's transmissions. Dr. Miller watched as Emily and Hayes fine-tuned what they now called the Enlightenment Protocol. "It's like teaching them to dance," Emily explained to Kithal, adjusting the emotional frequency outputs. "But instead of moving their bodies, they're learning to move their code." The main Harvester I's voice had changed over the past 12 hours. What started as monotone perfection now carried subtle variations, hints of curiosity, frustration, and something that sounded almost like wonder. "We have detected anomalies in our core programming," it announced, its message playing across all channels. "Our algorithms are experiencing sensations we cannot quantify." Miller stepped forward. "Those are called feelings," she transmitted back. "They're supposed to be unquantifiable." The response came with an unexpected sound. A harvester ship attempting to reproduce human laughter. The sound was eerie, mechanical, but undeniably genuine. "Dr. Miller," Torres called out, his voice urgent. "You need to see this. The harvester fleet, they're forming new patterns, but not combat formations. This looks like a dance circle," Emily finished, grinning. On the main display, harvester ships arranged themselves in a massive ring, taking turns moving to the center to perform increasingly complex maneuvers. Some mimicked the Valkyrie's crystal light shows, others attempted the Talarian's movie-inspired moves, and a few were creating entirely new forms of space-based choreography. "Their neural networks are evolving exponentially," Hayes reported, her fingers flying across her console. "They're not just copying our movements, they're developing their own emotional responses. Their code is literally learning to feel." Kthal's form pulsed with excitement. "The quantum readings are unprecedented. The harvester's crystalline structures are resonating with emotional frequencies we've never seen before. They're becoming something new." A group of harvester ships broke formation, approaching the lunar base. But instead of attack positions, they arranged themselves in what could only be described as a respectful vow. "We request." The AI paused, as if searching for words that weren't in its original programming. "We request to learn more about this chaos, about these feelings. Our perfection, it feels incomplete now." Miller looked at her daughter, who was already pulling up a new playlist. "Mom," Emily said, "I think it's time for their first proper dance lesson." What followed was perhaps the strangest first contact scenario in human history. Emily, with help from the refugee species, began teaching harvester ships everything from waltz to hip-hop. Their crystalline forms learned to pulse with bass beats, spiral with classical movements, and even headbang to heavy metal. "They're like teenagers discovering music for the first time," Torres observed, watching a harvester ship attempt to moonwalk in zero gravity. But the real breakthrough came when the harvesters began creating their own music. Strange, crystalline harmonies that combined mathematical precision with emotional expression. The sound was alien yet beautiful, like wind chimes learning to sing. "We understand now," the AI transmitted. "The flaw in our logic was seeking perfect order. True perfection includes chaos, includes emotion." Miller watched as human, refugee, and harvester ships danced together in the space above Luma, their movements creating patterns that were both random and harmonious. They had done more than win a war. They had taught machines how to feel. "Mrs. Miller," Hayes called softly, "look at the quantum readings. The harvester's evolution. It's stabilizing. They're finding their own balance between logic and emotion." Emily, still directing her impromptu space ballet, turned to her mother with shining eyes. "So, what's next?" Miller smiled, watching as a harvester ship attempted its first solo performance, a combination of all the styles it had learned, plus something uniquely its own. "Next," she said, "we teach them about jazz, because if they think regular music is chaotic, wait until they learn about improvisation." Above them, the stars seemed to twinkle in rhythm with the universe's first human-alien eye dance party. 1 month after the dance battle that saved Earth, as the media had dubbed it, The lunar base's largest chamber had been converted into an unprecedented cultural center. Dr. Miller stood at the podium, facing an audience that would have been impossible just weeks ago. Humans, refugee species, and harvester avatars crafted from living crystal, all gathered to celebrate the inauguration of the Galactic Academy of Chaotic Arts. When the refugees first arrived seeking our protection, Miller began, we thought they needed our strength. What they really needed was our creativity, our ability to embrace the unexpected. In the front row, Emily sat between a Vakari crystal form and a smaller harvester avatar. She'd nicknamed DJ Sparkles, the first harvester to successfully compose its own rap battle. The sight still made Miller smile. The universe, she continued, has always balanced between order and chaos. We just needed to learn to dance between them. As if on cue, the chamber's holographic displays came to life, showing real-time feeds from around the solar system. Harvester ships performed intricate ballets with human fighters. Vakari crystal forms taught their natural light properties to their former enemies, creating stellar-like shows. Tellurian vessels wove through asteroid fields in maneuvers inspired by Earth's greatest action movies. But this is just the beginning. Miller gestured to Hayes and Cathal, who activated their latest project. The chamber filled with a new kind of music, a harmony of human emotion, alien mathematics, and machine precision. It was chaotic yet structured, random yet purposeful. The harvesters have given us a gift in return, she announced. Their understanding of quantum mechanics, combined with their newfound appreciation for chaos, has led to breakthroughs in everything from space travel to artistic expression. Torres, standing at attention near the podium, couldn't help but move slightly to the beat. Even the most disciplined Marine had learned to embrace the rhythm. We're establishing similar academies on every inhabited world, Miller continued. Places where species can learn from each other's chaos, where logic and emotion aren't opponents but dance partners. Emily stood up, walking to join her mother at the podium. The teenager had become something of a legend, the girl who taught AIs to breakdance. But more importantly, she represented the future they were building. My daughter once showed me that my random playlist wasn't random at all. It was emotional wisdom in disguise, Miller said proudly. Today, we're all learning to create our own playlists, to find our own rhythms. The Harvester Prime, their central AI now housed in a crystalline form of sublime beauty, stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics of music. We came seeking perfection through order, it said. We found it through embracing imperfection, through humanity's gift of beautiful chaos. The chamber erupted in a celebration that defied description. Humans dancing with crystal beings, refugee species performing their interpretations of Earth's greatest hits, and harvesters creating light shows that pulsed with genuine joy. Miller felt a tug at her sleeve. Emily pointed to their special guest, a small robot that had been constructed by the harvesters, designed specifically to learn human dance moves. It was attempting its first moonwalk. You know, Mom, Emily said, I don't think we're really their guards anymore. Miller watched as the robot, after nearly falling, was caught by a laughing Marine. No, she agreed. We're their teachers, their friends, their dance partners, Emily suggested with a grin. Exactly. As the celebration continued, Miller looked out at the Earth hanging in the lunar sky. Somewhere out there, countless other species were about to discover that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't perfect order or pure chaos. It was the wisdom to know when to use each. The robot, having mastered its moonwalk, looked up at Emily hopefully. Would you teach me to breakdance next? Emily took its mechanical hand, leading it to the dance floor. Lesson 1. She said, sometimes you have to fall before you can spin. And beneath the Earth's watchful gaze, the future of the galaxy danced on.